Hey guys, welcome back to the Shared Voices podcast. I'm excited today. We got Rick and Monique in the living room, in the studio.
Yes, sir.
You bet.
So awesome to see both you guys. So I became friends with these people not too long ago. I got introduced to them, and they do co-marriage
Therapy.
therapy,
Yeah.
co-therapy. And honestly, I didn't know a lot about it until I met you guys. It makes a lot of sense, and I'm excited to share it with everybody. Because I really believe what you guys offer to married couples and loved ones, I guess they don't have to be married, is pretty unique and powerful. And to me, it's a new way. Maybe it's not new, but to me, it's a new way for a husband and wife to be able to come in and get healing together and make that a priority in their life. Because sometimes doing therapy on your own can be a little tough, a little hard.
Yep.
And I think what you guys do is awesome. So first of all, thank you. Thanks for being here. And Rick, you want to start off? Give us a little bit about you, and then we'll meet Monique, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, my name is Rick Elgersma, and I consider myself an Iowan, but I started out in Southern California, and then I lived a lot of my life in South Dakota, so I'm a Cali, Dakota Iowan. And so I'll claim all of them, mostly because Southern California has the Los Angeles Dodgers, so I have to claim them.
Well, yeah, of course. Family ties, right?
Absolutely.
Well, and I'm Monique Elgersma. I am Rick's wife. We have been married for nearly 29 years and been therapists since 2015, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a little bit. My background, though, is I'm a military brat, Army brat.
She's not a brat.
He says I'm not a brat, but it's a label. And I think it's the month of March, or April is the month of the military child. So I grew up in the military, lived in a number of different places. My dad was a warrant officer, PA in the Army. And so basically I spent 18 years of my life in the Army. So I understand what it's like for deployments and things like that, and the lingo and the acronyms and all that fun stuff. So however, I have lived in Iowa longer than I've lived anywhere else, so I'm considering myself an Iowan. So that's that I'm going to stick with it. My mom lives around here too now, so
That's awesome.
it's home.
Yeah. So growing up in the military family, you know all about then that for our military and first responders, it's not just the first responder or the soldier that is having struggles and having issues from the job. The job impacts the whole family.
Absolutely. I mean, every time my dad left or came back, mom would have to step in or step out, and that causes a little bit of can cause chaos in the house because she has to be mom and dad, disciplinarian and the soft one or whatever, and then dad comes back home and she's got to step back and let him take the lead again. And so, that can cause a lot of challenges. And I'm sure in some of our first responder families, if they're gone for 24, 48 hours, shifts, things like that, they're running into similar situations, or when they have to do trainings and such. So,
Yes.
Well, not to mention that every time he left, on some of them anyway, there was no guarantee that he wasn't going to come back or that he wasn't going to be injured on something. So that was also part of, her mom has told me about that kind of stuff, there was just no guarantee when he was gone, what condition he was going to come back in.
Yeah. And not just physically, but mentally, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we lived in Germany for a good chunk of my life. And so we were there when the wall was still there. So
Oh, wow.
that's how old I am.
Now you're dating yourself.
I am dating myself. So
Tear this wall down.
Exactly. We were still there when
You don't look a
the
day over
iron
49.
curtaining. Thank you, dear. But that still would be the curtain. The Berlin Wall didn't fall until I think, was it 89? And we left in 86. So, we were there when there were bomb threats there in the military. We had bombs go off in parking lots. We had times where we couldn't get on base and times we could. We had bomb threats, and we would have to leave the school and out of the building and go into as far away from the building as we could while they brought in dogs to sniff for bombs and make sure there wasn't anything, clear the area before we could go back in and learn. So to me, like, bomb threats are not a big deal, which is weird, right?
Yeah.
But it is, because that was part of my life.
Wow, that just shows you, like, obviously everybody's childhood is different, but you had unique challenges that other kids didn't have. That had to has to be a struggle, and that's why at 1042 Project we truly believe in a full family approach.
Mm-hmm.
That we don't just want to care for the first responder only, because that's not addressing the whole issue. We want to help the whole family.
Right.
And
Right.
I think that's cool what you guys do. So let's jump right into co-therapy. So I know a lot of people out there has tried counseling, different therapies. Um, you may have already tried going to a therapist or a counselor and it worked, or maybe it didn't work. And you've heard me say before that just because you tried one, please don't stop. There's a lot of good counselors and therapists out there. And I do understand they can be like tennis shoes. Some are good, some are bad, and some stink.
Mm-hmm.
But we need to also realize that when we try something, we try therapy, co-therapy, any type of our treatments, we don't want to just try one treatment. We want to pair those up with other ones. So your therapy along with whatever you may be, equine therapy, whatever it may be that you're getting help with. And so when we dive into co-therapy, what does that look like for our first responders, our military people? If and you can answer this too. Do people need to come to you guys when there's trouble?
Oh no, absolutely. We love working with our couples that just want to improve the relationship, right? Because we can teach them those skills to be resilient before a traumatizing event happens.
Yes.
Or multiple events happen. Rick likes to say we do startups, tune-ups, fix-ups, and all-out repair. So that's a fun way to think about it, right? We want people that before they get married, we'll work on premarital stuff. Let's make sure you're starting your relationship off with a good foundation. And then we've got people that are like, we just have communication issues. But that starts feeding into things like parenting issues and getting on the same page and having expectations and how to deal with the tough stuff.
You know, one single event, even if you have a strong marriage or a strong family life, one single event can take that and turn it sideways.
Yes.
And so sometimes it doesn't even take that much. It doesn't take this huge traumatic event to come to a time when you thought you were strong and you realize that there's a lot of work to do. So we're always an advocate for coming in and let's do some work.
I love that. So this co-therapy, what does that look like? Why is it different? I don't know if there's a lot of co-therapists here in the Des Moines area in Iowa, but I think it's awesome that you two are married and you do it together. So let's talk a little bit. Why did you guys choose to do that? What's the benefits, and why is that different than single therapy, or is it a mix of both?
Well, there is a mix of both, but I'll get to that in a second. It's important that you brought that up. We got together because we understood how valuable the team is. We form families, right? And we always talk about how there's strength in numbers, and we have all these little phrases that tell you that the more support you have, the stronger that unit is going to be.
It takes a village to raise a family or raise a child, right?
Right. All of those things lead us to the idea that the team matters. And so that's where we started. We started with the idea of couples helping couples simply because it changes the idea of a couple coming in and looking at a therapist and wondering if they're going to get biased or ganged up on or
Yes.
having those doubts or some of those fears of understanding that you're in therapy. And what co-therapy does is allow you to come in, work on hard things, and realize you belong to a team that's there to support you, a team that's there to have your back. And that's probably the single most important part of what couples say to us is that, one couple said that for the first time in 28 years of going to therapy, they finally felt like they had the support that they needed to succeed.
Wow.
The balance and support, right? You go to one therapist and they might lean towards or advocate for one of the person in the couple. And then they go to a different therapist who might lean towards the other person in the couple. When you have two therapists in the room, two trained people that are used to dealing with mental struggles or just relational communication struggles, we come in and, all therapists claim to and want to be unbiased. I'm not saying that they're doing it intentionally, but when you have two people in the room, it's like constant check and balance for us. So if for some reason I'm feeling a little bit leaning towards one of the clients or feeling triggered by one of the clients, Rick can make sure to balance the room by leaning towards the other client and, allying for the other person in the relationship. So they're always going to have that balance in the room. So even if I am being imbalanced, Rick will balance it back out by having that co-therapist in the room. To answer your question about how often you see that is it's very rare in the country. So it's not even like it's rare in Des Moines, it's rare in the country. We have another team in our office that are two female therapists that pair up together. They're married, but to other people, but they pair up and they do the co-therapy because regardless of whether you're married or not, although that does help because we know each other's nuances, having somebody else there helps that, what I just talked about, where if somebody's leaning one direction, the other therapist can lean the other direction to keep the balance in the room, to keep making sure that they're both feeling heard, understood, respected, valued in the room, helping the spouse to validate the spouse, making sure both sides actually do the work, right? So it's so much easier with someone else in the room. I've done some therapy by myself as a counselor with a couple, and I can tell you that it's heads above, miles above, better, in my opinion, for me as the therapist, plus for the clients, because they're getting so much more out of the sessions by having the two people there.
I love that. One of the things I hear the most from people, especially guys, because I work a lot with men, when it comes to counseling and they go to marriage counseling, it's almost every time, sorry guys, maybe the women do this too, but I'm calling you all out right now. When I speak with them, the first thing they say is, number one, well, the therapist agreed with me and my wife needs to do this and she needs to do that. Or they come and say the opposite. All I did was get attacked in there the whole time. Yeah. And they're extremely mad.
Yeah.
So I could see with the co-therapy, especially with husband and wife, with you guys, having that co-therapy to where people aren't leaving thinking I won that fight.
No.
Because I know when I went to marriage therapy and with my first marriage, every time I walked out of there, it was like keeping score.
Yep.
Like now they validate because they could say one thing to my wife to try to help her, and then I would use that. See the problems you have, and I feel like a lot of spouses do that.
There's so much ladder climbing out there. We always we're geared to compete.
Yes.
Even as from little kids, we're geared to take charge. We're geared to be to land on top. And when we created the co-therapy experience, what we didn't realize would happen is that we became a team in that counseling room. And often, just as a team functions out on the court or out on the field, each person has a position. So there isn't any winning. And I have a position, Monique has a position, and everybody each in the couple has a position. So nobody comes out on top. Nobody wins.
That's good.
There's like if somebody had an affair, that person certainly did something wrong. But in the end, it isn't about that person. We don't want to come down hard on that person because that what we really do is shine a light on the marriage.
Yeah.
And what both in that team did to help that team function at a lower capacity than it should have. And so we show up for practice and we talk about what each position is all about on that field and understand what each position should do and how each position should function at its top level. And when we can begin to do that, couples thrive.
I love that. So when doing that, when you guys do co-therapy, so obviously both spouses are in the room. So you got 4 of you in a room. Is that correct?
Yep.
Correct.
And then when you guys do that, is that every session or do you guys sometimes separate them and then come back as a group or do you just stay as a group? How do you guys do that? Because I've never been.
Well, it probably depends most on the situation of the couple, right? So sometimes we will purposely see one and we'll see them together, but then we make sure to keep the equality in the room. So then the next time we would see the other person by themselves, or we'll divide the session up. Like we might do, we do 80-minute sessions. We didn't say that earlier. We do a non-traditional amount of time as well. So most couples sessions are 50 minutes.
Okay.
More and more therapists couples therapists are moving to an 80, 90-minute session model because we all run into the same thing. For some reason, people wait till like 20, 30 minutes into the session to finally
Hit their
say, this
stride.
is what is the problem.
Yeah.
And then you have 15 minutes, maybe 20 to try to resolve
Sometimes
it.
less.
Sometimes, yeah, to resolve it, to work through it, to maybe teach a skill and schedule for the next one and move on. Right.
Yeah.
Well, even with our 80-minute sessions, it's still 20, maybe 30 minutes in. They hit that stride and want to talk to something. But now we've got 50 minutes
Yeah.
to actually work through it, to teach a skill, to process through it together as a team, as a group. And then when we're scheduling for a new session, a new time, a new skill, rather than, okay, well, we're going to have to table that till next time. And then we got to try to get back into that mode at the beginning of the next session they come in. And so having that longer time allows us to actually get through usually an issue in that session, and we're done with it. We don't have to come back to it. So because of that, it also allows us to do 15, 20-minute stuff with one spouse and then 15 and 20 minutes with the other spouse, and then bring them back together and talk about what we learned or what needs to come into the room. So we've done a little bit of both. And then the last level option that we have is, let's say one person in the couple needs more work. And they don't want to use their session time to work on their own anxiety or their own depression or their own childhood trauma or first responders trauma. And they want to do some work on that, but they don't want to take up the couple's time.
Yeah.
We can do that because we're co-therapists. We have the blessing or the extra level that we're allowed to then see one of them one-on-one. So they can choose. Do they want to be with Rick? Do they want to be with me? Who do they feel like they connect with the best? Or who's going to challenge them the best? And so then we can see one or both of them individually, separately, and then we come together as the team again, the four of us, to do the couples work.
And then there's something really cool that happens too. And then when they come in for that individual session, there's an instant recognition that they don't have to come into that session having to tell their story again.
Yes.
The whole thing of having to go to a new therapist and retell the story, which can be super traumatic to do,
Yes.
no matter what the situation is. But those who've experienced significant trauma, to have to retell that story again from ground zero is really tough. So we
take that away.
taken that away.
And we also know what they're working on in their couples work. So we can make sure to reinforce as we're working through anxiety, like, if you make these changes, it's going to help over here. And we're not contradicting what their goals are for their couples therapy as well.
I love that. And then you really allow the couple to be a team as
Right.
opposed to just being, because we are a team. When we're married, we're a team, whether you like it or
Absolutely.
not. Like, we are each other's other half. And I think how you guys do it with the four of you in the room just really brings that team atmosphere to where, you don't have to carry all the weight on your own.
And the other person, probably, I don't know if it's the best benefit, but one of the great things about pulling you into an individual session with just me is that your spouse now knows that they trust me.
Mm-hmm.
And they also know that when we come into that session, I'm going to help you, but I'm not going to compromise the spouse.
Yes.
Because if I compromise the spouse, then somehow when we go back into that couple session, all of a sudden I'm super aligned with you and the whole thing is lopsided. I never want that to happen. And our couples understand that going in, that isn't going to happen. So that's pretty cool.
Wow. That's amazing. Like, that's the way I could see marriage counseling working a lot better than it has in the past. I mean, honestly.
Yep.
Well, and the extra layer of that is, let's talk about the first responders and the military. We've got this mindset of we've got to suck it up.
Yes.
And, we can't show feelings. We can't
Keep it tough.
Yeah, I got to keep it tough. Can't be vulnerable. So trying to find a therapist, I mean, as a therapist, I have a hard time finding a therapist that I feel comfortable with and trust. Like you started this podcast off with, It's hard to find a therapist that you connect with, and it's okay to go to different ones until you find the right one. That's true. Well, in the couples therapy, if they really connect with us, then they don't have to do that. They can just come in and start working on their stuff.
Wow. I could totally see how that would be way more productive.
Yeah.
Than that. So when a married couple is struggling, and let's talk about first responders, because when a lot of times when first responders are struggling with their mental health, it can get messy.
Yep.
It can be embarrassing. We do things we're not proud of. I know I did myself. I became an alcoholic. I was addicted to pain pills, doing things I wasn't proud of. And why am I going down that road? I don't know. I just lost my train of thought. But
people go into those modes trying to cover the chaos with chaos.
Yeah.
And trying to numb the chaos going on in their bodies by doing chaotic things. And it's natural for them to go into chaotic mode because that's the thing that they understand.
Yes.
So we do chaotic things because that's the space that we feel most comfortable in. And it seems sort of weird to say that for a lot of people, or hear that for a lot of people, but that's the truth, is trying to create, fight fire with fire.
Mm-hmm.
That's the hope, is that the fire will somehow be quelled. But what really happens is that it turns into a bonfire and then a forest fire, and then and it goes from there.
Yeah, like I said, things get ugly when you deal with your mental health. You do things you're not proud of, and being able to come in and do some co-therapy with you guys, and to be able to just lay it on the table.
Yep.
Whether it's affair, whether it's an addiction, whether it's sex addiction, porn addiction, doesn't matter what it is. To be able to have a place where you can come in and lay it on the table, no guilt, no shame, and just allow yourself to be taught. And what I mean by that is a lot of us get really upset because we're not good at our relationships, and we're not good at being the husband we want. And we take it personal, and we get really, really frustrated. I'm losing my train of thought again, Rick.
Well, I think if
I'll help you.
I do this every episode.
I think in that part of where you're trying to go with that is that, it's hard to go home when you've been through a tough day.
Yeah.
Or a tough scene.
Yes.
And, there's times that you are the hero and you get to save somebody, but there's also times that you don't.
Yes.
And how do you bring that? How do you separate yourself from that and go home?
Yes.
To your own family, to your own wife or husband, to your own partner, whatever your relationship thing is, or a whole group like that, even a roommate. How do you go home after you've gone through something really horrible and not have it impact your family?
Yes. And we don't know what we don't know. So again, what I was going to say before was we shouldn't beat ourselves up because we don't have the answers.
Right.
You guys, and I used to deal with this. I used to be, upset with myself because I didn't know something. But if we were never taught it or learned it, then we don't know it. It's okay to put our pride down and say that we don't know.
What people sometimes forget to recognize, the job that they took, they did that for really their own reasons, but to be a cliche, to protect and to serve, and understand that they get to do some good in this world. And then they recognize that the good that they're doing is good, but the bad that they're seeing is some of the worst stuff that's imaginable. And then you're asking them to go home and be completely normal after seeing some of the most unnatural things that anyone could ever imagine.
Yes.
And how do you imagine normalcy after seeing something so completely abnormal that there's no processing that?
And I think that's a lot that first responders and military people deal with right there is what you were just saying. Man, I am losing my mind today.
Normal, abnormal.
See, the problem is I think about what you were talking about, and then I'm thinking about the thought that I got coming up. And then we do this back and forth thing, and then I sit there with a dumb look on my face.
It's called a nothing box.
What's that?
It's called a nothing box.
I got a nothing box, that's for sure.
This guy's got a lot of nothing boxes.
But I think as first responders, when we do go out and we deal with the trauma, or military, we go out and deal with the trauma. And when you're at work, a lot of times, you're in go mode. You're in you put your face on, really. Your mask is what it feels like. And you get through the day. But when you go home, that's why we call this the 1042 project, because it's a 10 code for end of watch. When you go home, you now got to process these feelings. And when you're married or you have a loved one at home, most of us do not know, and this is, you shouldn't know because you've never been taught it. A lot of us don't know what to do with those emotions when we walk through the front door because our wife, our husband, whatever your sex is, in their home, they want to talk right away. You know, the kids are meeting you at the door, and at the same time, you're having the images of the calls you were at, and you know, it's the most emotional time for me anyway as a first responder when you first get home. And I think one of the good things that you guys can probably help teach is, instead of us first responders shutting down and telling our loved ones nothing, what is a good way for when we come home and have these full of feelings, and our spouse wants to know because they care for us, they love us, and we want to, you know, in my opinion, we all have our own opinion, but in my opinion, I don't think it's healthy to not tell them anything. I think all that does is causes confusion. It causes them to think that they're the problem, or their mind's just going to start trying to figure it out on their own. And generally, when you do that, it's coming up with a very worse scenario than after you just talked about it. And I'm not saying you have to say everything that happened. You don't have to describe the scene.
Details.
So how does a first responder military person do that? When you have these emotions and you come home, what's a good way to be a loving spouse to your spouse when you come home?
Well, I'm going to start with saying the fact, you know, you kind of alluded to it, but I'm just going to lay it out there, is that regardless of whether you think as the first responder or the military person that you're hiding it really well,
We're not.
you're not.
Yeah.
And so your spouse is seeing it, and you kind of alluded to it. You're like, and they're thinking, I did something. I'm the problem. That's why they're angry. That's why they're frustrated. That's why they're acting irritable, when really it's them processing the trauma and what's going on. And so, you know, part of it is we work with a couple to kind of find a way that they find will work for them, right? And what I mean by that is maybe you do codes. One of the things that people tend to say is they ask the question, how are you today? And 90% of the time we all go, good, fine, whatever. We're lying like half the time. We're not fine.
If
we're
not
not
more,
okay.
yeah.
It might be lying. So we're teaching ourselves to lie. And so one of the things we teach people is use weather patterns. Like you could do this with first responders could start this today. Is like, how was your shift today? You know, it's fair to partly cloudy.
Oh, yeah, see. I like that.
That lets them know that it wasn't a great day, but it wasn't an awful day. Or, man, it was a stormy day. There was thunder and lightning everywhere. That lets the spouse know that it was a rocky shift. And I'm not ready to talk about it, but at least you know it's not you.
Yes.
And maybe they don't want to talk about it at all and they take it, save it for therapy, or maybe they have someone else that they process with, but that lets the spouse know, hey, it was a tough shift, without having to say it was a tough shift.
Right. Yep. And then the husband or the spouse, whoever the first responder is, then thinks that they're being attacked.
Right.
And then the arguments start. And then now you come home from work, you have these emotions, and now you're taking it out on your spouse. And then you're up in your bedroom going, what the heck just happened?
And I don't know how many, spouses of someone who's a soldier or spouse of a first responder has said, you know, I want to keep that promise that I made to you when we got married. I want to keep that in place. So even if it's horrible for me to hear, as much as you're willing to tell me, I promised you that I would hold on to that, and I want to keep that promise. And so a lot of the times we will help couples learn to think in terms of what their vows were. Some of them had non-traditional vows. Many of them had very traditional vows, for better or for worse. Well, that for worse in this case gets pretty bad. Yeah. And yet that vow is still there, and it can be used for good. Like, you know, Monique said or alluded to, you don't have to give it all up, but at the same time, you can trust me to handle some of this.
Yes. Right.
And then if I have an adverse reaction to it, you know, we can go into therapy together and talk through some of this trauma together, because that secondary trauma is just as important as the primary trauma in different ways, but just as important. And now we get to heal from this together. Having known some of this information together, we get to heal together too. That can make such a big difference.
Because the spouse can have the responders back, right?
Yeah.
Because if they only have their comrades,
yeah, that's never good.
Then what you could end up having is I won't say the blind leading the blind, but if you're struggling with alcoholism already and your buddy's struggling with his trauma and he doesn't ever talk to anyone else to deal with that and he's talking to you, what's your response going to be? Like, hey, let's go get a beer. Let's go drink a six pack. Let's go whatever. Right. And so by using your spouse as a resource for you to be able to share a little bit about what you're going through without necessarily the details, that gives them an opportunity to say, man, that's tough. That sucks. I don't know how you do it. What do you need from me right now? One of the phrases we often teach our couples is, what do you need from me right now? Because and the right now part is key, right? Because what I need right now might be, I need 15 minutes by myself. It was such a bad day. I need 15 minutes, a half an hour to just decompress without being bothered by you or the kids. It's not personal. It's what I need to do for my mental health, right?
Yes.
So that's what I need right now. What I might need right now at 8:00 is, hey, can we get the kids to bed? I need some time with you.
Yep.
Or, hey, we need to get away. I'm off this weekend. Let's go somewhere. I'm off Monday and Tuesday. Can you take Monday off? Let's get out of town. Whatever. What I need right now is different depending on what time of the day is, when it happened, when we're talking. So we always say, what do you need from me right now? I need a back rub. What do you need from me right now? I need space. What do you need from me right now? I need a hug.
Yeah. I love that. And what I like about it is, and this is perfectly comes full circle here, you guys, we need to be taught how to do this in a healthy way. That's why going to co-therapy ahead of time, before you have issues, when you start your career, when you start your marriage, they can help you in there prepare for when trauma happens in your career, to where you guys already have those on your tool belt, to where when the trauma happens, you're not trying to figure it out in the heat of the moment. You had been going to co-therapy and getting help along the way, training for when these happen, getting prepared, not out of fear, but just because these happen. So when in doing that co-therapy is a powerful part of learning. And again, we're not supposed to know things we don't know.
No.
But we can learn things that we don't know. And I think that's the power of going to co-therapy and getting counseling through that, is for when these times come, your marriage will stay strong. It will be on a solid rock foundation, to where when these things happen, we're not talking out of anger. We're not talking out of reaction. We're talking out of what we've been taught and what we have planned as a couple and how to do with this. And I think that's important to have a game plan.
Yes. Yes.
Well, thanks for your talk, Rick.
facto,
I
that
was
appreciate
good.
you.
That was
And
very
that's
helpful.
Rick today, guys.
I'm all about the profound. Simple
Yes.
and profound.
Yeah,
Yes.
I like it.
What we really love about being in the counseling room, as a couple or as a team, with that other team and that other couple, is that we're all watching how each other cares about each other, which is unique. When they're watching one therapist, they're not watching that therapist care about somebody else. They're watching that therapist do therapy for the couple.
Wow.
And with co-therapy, they're coming in and they're watching me care for Monique. They're watching me care about the direction she's going. They're watching me care about the stuff that she's writing on the board. They're watching me care about how the conversation is going. And we're watching them, how they care about each other. And some of them get pretty contentious, but at the same time, we're teaching care simply by being there, caring about each other in motion. And that's the one thing that's super special about co-therapy, is that care, that present care isn't in a traditional counseling room. And like you said at the very beginning, there are different types of therapy and we love them. We participate in a small part of the world of therapy, and there are so many types of therapy that are excellent. We just want you to know what you're going to get when you come into this little world called co-therapy, and how special that can be, and how caring and loving it is right out of the gate.
I love that. And we're going to end this episode on this. But before we leave, Rick and Monique, how do couples get a hold of you? How do they reach out? How do they get this process started? And where are you guys located? Either one of you want to share
I'll go ahead.
your name of your organization,
Rock and roll,
your
Monique.
name of your company, where you're located, and how they can get a hold of you? Because I really believe there's going to be a lot of people listening that are ready for some co-counseling to help their marriage get to the next level.
Okay.
Well, our business is called Real Connections Counseling. I'm going to take just a second to talk about that as we
You go,
end up.
girl.
Real connections, right? You started the podcast off and then we went straight into the co-therapy, which is perfectly fine. But you were talking so much about how it's important that we learn how to have good relationships. Well,
Yes.
Real Connections, the name came from that, right? We want people to develop and create real connections with their spouse, with their families, with their loved ones, whoever they consider someone close and important in their world. We want those connections to be real. And so real relationships are important. So Real Connections Counseling. You can look us up on the website, realconnectionscounseling.com. It's on Facebook that way as well. I think it's on Instagram that way, right, Rick?
Insta.
And
Look at us old people being hip.
whatever. Anyway, and our phone number.
It isn't often that I feel that cool.
Direct phone number is 515-635-1805. You can leave a message and we'll get back to you. You can also go to our website and there's a Calendly link that you click on. You click on the schedule a consult. They can do that so they can do it convenient. We encourage them to do that with their spouse at the same time. So when they call in, when they get that phone call, they'll talk to our administrator. Her name is Alyssa. She will want to gather the information about them and what they're looking for in their therapy. It's a 15 to 20 minute consult.
Mm-hmm.
And so we like them to do that as a team. So whoever they're partnering with for the counseling. So that's on our website. If they call in, she'll probably suggest that they do that so that they can have the conversation with her and the partners. And then she'll figure out whether the best fit, whether it's with Rick and I or with Jess and Cora or a mix of some sort like that. So they can certainly give their opinions about that. So we'd love to have them join us.
Awesome.
Come see us that way. We are located, our primary office is located in Urbandale. We do have a small office in Winterset. So if anyone happens to be outside of the city and wants that and that's convenient, we're usually there on either Friday or Saturday. That's another option.
We can't take insurance. We have two people and we go 80 minutes. And we cannot take insurance. There isn't an insurance out there that will touch us, that is able to see the genius of that kind of this kind of therapy. But we get to act in such profound ways outside of the constraints of insurance.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a host of benefits in that realm as well.
I agree. And we're all so quick to go out and spend money on our toys and four-wheelers and new handguns and all this stuff, but we really need to invest in our marriages. And it's usually the last thing that people make a priority, and it's usually the first thing in their life that crumbles is their marriage.
Because if you don't have a good relationship, then the rest of the stuff is just stuff.
Means nothing. Right? Yep.
Means nothing.
And the 80-minute model I talked about earlier, plus the two therapists, also being able to get through a whole session or whole issue in one session also allows us to spread the sessions out further. So instead of coming in weekly or even every other week, sometimes we go out 3 weeks. So most couples we start with every other week just to get them in a good place. But we can go to once a month or whatever because they've got time to practice in between sessions that way.
I love that.
So that's a consideration that needs to be included when you're thinking about what you're spending for therapy. So.
That's right. It's important. And thank you guys for doing this. Really. And thank you for reaching out and us getting connected. And I love your guys' heart for the military and our first responders here in Iowa. So thank you for what you do. And I know you guys are doing powerful work. If you guys don't mind, maybe we stick around for one more episode after this one.
Sure.
Absolutely.
All right. We're going to close it out, guys. Thank you. Enjoy your week. God bless you. And we'll see you.
See you on the other side.
See you on the flip side.